Welcome to the MAPS Canada webinar series. My name is Shannon Smedilla, and I'm your host for the series, as well as a volunteer for MAPS Canada. We are extremely excited to have you join us for our third episode of our webinar series. Throughout the next few months, we have an amazing selection of speakers, luminaries, scientists, doctors, and visionaries lined up for you. We've gathered some of the best in the field, 11 additional speakers to be exact, to share some important information and their take on the psychedelic renaissance. For those of you who are joining us who are not familiar with MAPS, I'm happy to share with you a brief introduction. MAPS Canada, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, is a registered charitable nonprofit Canadian organization and is an affiliate organization of the original MAPS based out of Santa Cruz, California, which was founded in 1986. MAPS Canada furthers its mission by providing evidence-based, honest public education about the risks and benefits of psychedelics, supporting scientific research into many aspects of psychedelics, including treatments for medical conditions, neuroscience, creativity, and spirituality, planning, conducting, and publishing scientific research of psychedelic medicines, developing psychedelics and prescription medicines, training psychedelic psychotherapists, and working to establish a network of treatment centers that can provide this service in the context of professional best practices. For more information on MAPS, you can view the website at mapscanada.org. The funds raised from this webinar series will go to fund research associated with various studies that are on the agenda with MAPS Canada. So some housekeeping items for today. The full webinar will be approximately an hour and a half. We'll start with a talk from our guest, Chris Kilham, who is joining us today. And after that, we will go into a question and answer session. So as you can see at the bottom of your screen, you have a question and answer tab. That's where you want to submit your questions. And feel free to use the chat, talk amongst yourselves, tell us where you're from. We have a wide array of people today. We have New Brunswick, we have California, we have Toronto, we have Vancouver, Colorado, and I believe I even saw Toronto, Brazil, Ottawa, Santa Cruz, Peru, and Oregon, Amsterdam, Mexico. So glad to see Florida. Glad to see everyone on today. Thank you guys for joining us. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you medicine hunter Chris Kilham. Chris is a medicine hunter, explorer, lifelong yogi, psychedelic advocate, and media personality. He has investigated medicinal plants among indigenous people globally for decades, from Siberia to the Amazon to the Congo. The author of 15 books, including the international bestseller, The Five Tibetans, Chris has appeared in over 2,000 radio and 500 TV programs. The New York Times calls Chris part David Attenborough and part Indiana Jones. In this episode, we will explore how psychedelics allow us to explore the landscape of mind, spirit, enjoying visions, insights, and revelations otherwise obscure to us. Especially potent experiences lead to the classic mystical experience in which time, self-identity, and all sense of separateness cease. This breakthrough consciousness is bold, transformative, and enlightening. Please help me welcome Chris Kilham.
Oh, thank you so much, Shannon. It's a lovely intro. And hello to you all out there. I'm looking at the scrolling list of people and where you come from. It's a great gathering. I will tell you that between the time I was listening to the description that you just read of my talk, and I do remember writing it, but between the time that I wrote that and now, I kind of took it a little bit to a little bit of a left turn with this, and so I kind of want to lead into that a bit. Over the, well, really since the late 1960s, I've had an involvement with psychedelics, starting with LSD, and including but not limited to peyote and San Pedro, a great deal of ayahuasca. And it's been my pleasure and privilege to not only explore psychedelics, but to be guided by them, to be aided by them. And I think you know, the biggest thing that people come away with, it seems to me, when the psychedelic experience is kind of full on and happens at a beautiful level, is that mystic sense of everything being connected, of all things coming together at once, of the indivisibility of all life. And I know that when people are, for example, in ayahuasca ceremonies, very often they will say the next day, you know, I had an encounter with the spirit of the medicine, and it was, you know, whatever it was a grandmother, it was an anaconda, it was a jaguar, it was a hummingbird, it was a something that spoke to them or somehow moved them. And that these experiences so broaden our sense of mind and sense of the vastness of dimension of our own selves, that they really can be transformative. I do believe, as many people are realizing these days, that you know, doing follow-up work, integration work, in many instances, psychotherapy can be an important part of the psychedelic process. But these are like mental crowbars for some of us. These are extremely enlightening, helping us in some instances to discover entire dimensions of thinking or being within ourselves that we didn't know existed before. And so this whole idea of interconnectedness is what I like to refer to as sort of the big wahoo, that there is no divisibility among us, that we are all one humanity, we are all in one spirit. But also it's the case that with medicinal plants, whether you're talking the plants that make ayahuasca or kava or peyote or San Pedro, the mushrooms, which are not plants, but they're fungi, but they're certainly included in the category. Um, Not only is there this mystic sense of connectedness, but as these medicines become popular, so there is a connectedness among vast numbers of people. And in the case of ayahuasca, which I would like to focus on right now, there are a great many people who have been really put on the ropes as a result of COVID-19. And I want to take you through some of the ayahuasca landscape. And in a way, I feel like this is kind of going backstage and talking about all of the different ways that people engage with these medicines and what this time means in their lives. So with that said, I'm going to, let's see, if I go to this and then hit, oh, help me here. So I struggle.
Can you just
If I go full screen, are you getting that now?
Not yet. No.
No. Okay, you are absolutely not getting that now. How?
So you'll just want to hover over your screen,
That's right. I have to do.
and then at the top you'll be able to share.
All right.
Perfect.
And then, are we up and Adam here with this now?
You
Yep,
are
so
up and Adam.
Okay. And is that the screen's not cluttered or anything strange?
Nope. If you just make your PowerPoint full size, I believe it will.
All right. Hang on a second. This should be so much easier. All right. Full screen. There we go. Are we all on board?
We are.
Yeah. Okay, great. So what I want to do is talk about what has happened during this time of COVID-19, because those of us who have benefited from ayahuasca, of us, especially those of us who've gone down to South America, and Peru really has been the epicenter of ayahuasca travel, people going down there for ceremonies. You probably know that there's a vast network of people and activities associated with ayahuasca, and all of that has been imperiled by COVID-19. Um, from January 2018 to April 2019, I did a sustainability project with my Peruvian team investigating the actual source and supply of ayahuasca vine. And this was focused in Loreto and Ucayali departments. And you can see on this map here, Loreto is the area of Peru that contains Iquitos, and Ucayali department is the area that contains Pucallpa. These are the two biggest river towns, and they're connected by the Ucayali River. And it is this area where we have the greatest concentration of shamans in practice, of ayahuasca trade, of ayahuasca centers, all of which are out of business at this point in time. I want to acknowledge Maria Sina, who in 1997, when I was living in Brazil on the river with natives there, I met. She was 103 at the time. She was really the shaman's shaman. The other shamans in the area all went to her when they had needs and had problems. And she had not met me before, and we had no prior communication, but she sat down with me, excuse me, and she talked with me about my work as though she knew it well. And she said, "You bridge the worlds, and this is important for you to do, and you need to tell people about each other." And even though I had been doing that in my work up until that point, it really galvanized my sense of purpose in terms of telling people about each other and trying to foster greater understanding among people. So I've done a lot of presentations on indigenous native people that I've met in Ghana or Siberia or the hill tribes of Thailand or whatever. But I really have spent a great deal of time in the Amazon, about 35 different missions there. So a lot of my Bridging Worlds really does relate to the people and the activities there. There's been a lot of speculation about the supply of ayahuasca vine. And it was really this speculation that led me to decide that I wanted to do a sustainability survey. I had a very, very good team of people in Peru. And as we went around, what we discovered was a vast network of people. People growing ayahuasca, people harvesting it, people transporting it, people assisting in the harvesting, boating, motorized transport, making ayahuasca to sell, all different things. And then the support services that spring up around the areas where the ayahuasca centers are in operation, including restaurants, etc. All of this has been completely changed by COVID-19. Right now, all of this activity has been suspended. And for those of us who have benefited mightily from ayahuasca, who've been to Nihui Rao or Temple of the Way of Light or Ayahuasca Foundation or Blue Morpho or Aya Madre or Dreamglade or any of the centers in operation that do a good job, we also owe a great deal to the entire cast of people behind the scenes that we may not necessarily even meet in our journey. The initial part of this project, which was a 4-part project, was published in Herbalgram, which is the Journal of the American Botanical Council. So here's my team in Peru. You have on the left Jaime Baca, who is a boatman, who is one of the most seasoned people in the entire area of the Ucayali River. You have Claylee Vargas, and she is an agroforestry engineering student who's close to finishing her degree. And in the blue shirt, Sergio Cam, who runs an herbal business called Chacarunas Trading, and with whom I've traveled since 1998 all over the Andes and the Amazon. We've probably investigated 15 or more rivers together. And then in a separate photo, Juan Maldonado, who's a well-known figure in the Iquitos scene, who's also an excellent guide. He guides birders and fishermen and tourists and people who want to hike in the forest, and he was helpful with this survey. The breadbasket of ayahuasca for Peru really appears to be the region of the Rio Tamaya. That is a river that runs east away from Pucallpa toward the Brazilian border. And it's an area rich in ayahuasca and traffickers and loggers and robbers. So it's an interesting spot. And this is an aerial view of Lago Emeria. It is a beautiful natural area. It's largely unspoiled, tremendous amount of wildlife. And it is from here that almost all, not all, but almost all of the ayahuasca vine that is used in the Pucallpa area and also in the Iquitos area and beyond, this is where it derives. Additionally, if you can see on this other photograph, you have Lago Emeria, that's Lake Emeria, on the top of the picture. And beside it, even somewhat more remote, is Chao Ya. Chao Ya is even harder to get to. Sometimes the waterways to Chao Ya just disappear entirely for days at a time because they're floating islands of vegetation that open and close. But this is where, to this day, vast untapped tonnage of forest ayahuasca still exists, all ages, from 5-year-old vines to 85-year-old vines. Here are some of the people we met. Here are some of the people who may have been involved when you've been in an ayahuasca ceremony in a maloca someplace and you've reached for that glass and you've drunk that brew. It's very possible that the people I'm showing you today had some sort of involvement with that. This harvester, Mateo Teco, who is in the village of Junin Pablo, which is the village closest to Lago Emeria. He's been harvesting ayahuasca for about 20, 24 years or so. He's one of the largest harvesters, and he has orders of many hundreds of kilos a month. And what that means is that he also hires young men from the village who go out with him, and they also earn a living harvesting and helping Mateo. It also means that he's able to buy supplies at the local store, and on and on and on. His business has been completely cut off. There are no people going to the ayahuasca centers. There are no people drinking ayahuasca there right now. And yes, there may be village healers who are performing ceremonies in their villages for people who need it. But for the most part, the market has completely collapsed. So here's somebody with a large family and a history of doing well who suddenly is completely out of the picture for now. A fellow harvester, also been harvesting for about 24 years or so, is Antonio Calper, who I'm pictured here with him in this photograph. We were in the forest in Lago Emeria. The vine I have my hand around is maybe 8 years old or so. We found some vines as old as 40 years. These harvesters are very respectful of the older vines. They don't take them. They consider them to be mother vines. And I want to make a point about this. Sometimes we're sitting in an ayahuasca ceremony and we feel very, very close to the spirit of the plants, the spirit of ayahuasca. I can assure you that these people who go out in the forest day in and day out and bring tonnage of ayahuasca vines out on their backs to boats for the long, long, long journey that it takes to get this to market in Pucallpa, which is about 8 hours away or so, depending on the flow of the river and who does or doesn't stop you. These people also have a very strong, very potent connection with the spirit of the plants. And they're guided by certain ethics like don't take the old mother vines, leave those. So they are part of a chain of good intent and goodwill and good focus for these plants. This is wild forest harvesting. The conditions are rough. They are primitive. There are snakes. There are stinging insects. And however much you harvest in the forest, you have to carry it out. Here, Antonio is with his son, Nixon, who also helps with the harvesting and has developed all manner of forest skills as a result of going into the forest with his father and with his mother and with his older sister. This is Antonio on a boatload of ayahuasca vine. There were about 24 40 kilo or 25 kilo bundles of ayahuasca in this particular boatload. This is how these people sustain themselves, sustain their families, and help to sustain the people who work with them. Right now, there are no boatloads of ayahuasca vine. Right now, all of the good energy and good work that these people have done is very much at a standstill. And at this point in time, we have absolutely no idea how the scene will return when it does and what shape it'll be in from that point forward. A critical part of all of the trade in the medicinal plants, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about rosemary in Morocco or a certain type of let's say kola nut in Ivory Coast or whatever. Transport is always part of the process, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boats that carry people and goods from one town to another, to another, to another, and into the big ports like Pucallpa and Iquitos. And this is how ayahuasca gets brought into Port of Pucallpa. There's nobody putting ayahuasca onto boats now. So the 5 nuevo soles that gets paid for every bundle is not getting paid to these people. It's also the case that there are thousands of porters who work the waterfronts of Pucallpa and Iquitos, who support their families by doing backbreaking labor. This guy gets 1 nuevo sol, about 35 cents, for hauling something like this. So if he hauls, say, 10 of these, he'll get a little about $3.50. Very, very tough work. Even so, people like this now have no living whatsoever. There is nobody there is no demand for ayahuasca. This has been one of the many, many tragic parts of COVID-19. If you've been to South America, especially if you've been to the Iquitos area, you know that the primary transport for people and goods is a moto. So basically a motorcycle front with a kind of a cab back. And it is typical and common to see all manner of goods, from rebar to small refrigerators to you name it, strapped onto the backs of motos. There are thousands of moto operators in the Pucallpa and Iquitos areas. Now, for the most part, they're entirely out of work. They're not supporting their families. They're not able to feed themselves. This has become quite a crisis. So, and in the ayahuasca chain of trade, there is no ayahuasca to transport anywhere because there's no demand. This particular warehouse that Sergio is standing in, he's holding a vine, maybe about 25-year-old vine, a section of that. The man who owns this warehouse typically buys 700 to 900 kilos of ayahuasca vine every month and then resells 10 kilos here, 20 kilos here. It's a steady part of his business. He's not buying any at all because nobody's buying from him. So any of the demand, any of the pull that would result in boatloads of ayahuasca coming into the port of Pucallpa, that's not happening anymore. Also in Pucallpa, we had the opportunity on a couple of occasions to meet with Jimmy Rojas. He was a chief and a shaman in his village further out. And he moved into the Manante neighborhood of Pucallpa, which is one of the sprawling basically Shipibo tribal neighborhoods of that area. And for the past few years, he's been making 30 or 40 liters of ayahuasca every month that he sells to 2 different centers up in the Sacred Valley. But they're not open because nobody's going to them. So there's no demand. So he's not making 30 or 40 liters a month. So he doesn't have a way to support his family now. This is one of the continuing tragic parts of this whole COVID-19 scene. And we're connected to these people. If we've drunk the medicine, if we've sat in ceremony, we are connected by that vast dendritic web of life to these people. They have actually made a difference in our lives and experiences. Shaman Willer Noriega, a longtime friend for many years, works and lives in the village of Limanhima, where he has a retreat center there. He also makes a very, very concentrated ayahuasca. You look at this ayahuasca, it looks like chocolate pudding. It doesn't exactly taste like chocolate pudding, although I have to say that it is so concentrated that it does have a little bit of an almost a burnt chocolate flavor. It's not that bad, actually. I mean, not that bad is high compliments for the flavor of ayahuasca. He's had steady demand for this, shipping to the international market. All of that is gone now, just blown away with COVID-19. In Iquitos, you have a woman named Elizabeth Bardales, and she is one of the most ingenious people I've met in that entire region. She has an herbal manufacturing business, so she's extracting botanicals of all different kinds. She's extracting cat's claw. She's making different combinations of botanicals. And she is somebody who people who make ayahuasca can bring their ayahuasca to, and then she concentrates them down into bricks that are almost completely solid. And if you see this neat little stack of Tupperware containers, each one of those is a brick of ayahuasca, different weights and different sizes, concentrated to about 10 or 15 times concentration. So you put these in water and you basically rehydrate them, and then you have a large volume of ayahuasca. This has revolutionized shipping ayahuasca out of Peru. But right now, of course, Elizabeth doesn't have any business. She has almost no business, but neighborhood business for the herbal store that she has that sells hundreds and hundreds of herbal products and formulas from plants from all over the Amazon and from suppliers from all over the Amazon. Now that that business has fallen largely apart, she has little demand to order more medicinal plants from these people. And also, she's not getting the business to make bricks of ayahuasca because nobody's really shipping out right now. Here you have at both Los Cielos on the left, which is outside of Pucallpa, a couple hours, about 3 hours outside, and El Purguero, which is outside of Iquitos and south of Iquitos. You have large batch making of ayahuasca. In the case of Los Cielos, they make about 100 liters at a time. It's an enormous labor. It takes them about 11 days to do it. They have really brilliant ayahuasca. They have a super high concentration of chacruna in it, the highest concentration I know of. Pretty much everybody gave me their recipes and formulas for making ayahuasca, and theirs was particularly bright as a result of all the chacruna. But in both cases, in Los Cielos and El Purguero, excuse me, they were making very large amounts of ayahuasca for a long period of time. And now they're just not doing that because there is no demand. People aren't going to either center. And so all this activity and all of the staff and the support people and everybody who's part of this, they're all out of work right now. There is a place outside of Pucallpa, excuse me, called Vivero Ucayali Rainforest. And this is a large and very well managed seedling garden. They have seedlings for a pretty broad variety of rainforest trees, vines, ornamental, decorative, and medicinal plants of all different kinds. And here I am with ayahuasca vine seedlings, which they had been doing a very brisk business in right up until the time of COVID-19. But because the market has basically collapsed, because businesses have been closed, they really have little or no demand for their seedlings. So fortunately, they have healthy plants and they can tend them and they can keep them watered. But this whole part of the business of getting these plants started for those people who are cultivating ayahuasca, and there are many people cultivating now, this has temporarily just kind of in a coma, if you will. If you go south on the Nauta Road out of Iquitos, one of the places you get to is Sachamama. This is run by Francisco Montes, and he has been there for about 35 years. He's one of the people cultivating vines. He has a lot of people who come to his center, though not now. He has a lot of people who also come to his really beautiful visionary art gallery, but not now. He has about 6,000 vines that he has planted over the years. He has thousands of chacruna bushes as well. But right now there's no demand, so his staff has no work. He's not supporting his family by doing ceremonies and having people at his site anymore. People aren't going to his gallery. So this whole particular all the way down the Nauta Road, where you have, about 120 or so centers, none of them are in business right now. Ronnie Wheelock, who is a relatively well-known, referred to as the Gringo Shaman, was featured on Lisa Ling's CNN ayahuasca special, seen here with a 20-year-old vine. When I went to see Ronnie, he had completely gotten out of buying any vine or chacruna from anyone else. He has enough now to make about 1,000 liters of ayahuasca and has a good plan for doing that. But now there's no demand. Now nobody's going to his centers. Now nobody's buying ayahuasca. He's not making ayahuasca. There's nobody to sell it to. Some of the local shamans in small villages are still doing ceremonies for people who just plain need healing, who are locals. This village shaman on the left, Julio Siri, was in the village of San Rafael, about 20 minutes, 25 minutes boat ride north out of Iquitos. And you can see him working on, actually working on Juan Maldonado, doing a ceremony on him. So the local shamans are still getting a little bit of business, as they do for people who need healing, need guidance, need vision, whatever. But that's it. He's self-sufficient. He's not buying or selling any of the plants that he uses, so he's not really a participant in the economy, except that he charges for his services. But healing centers are all closed down right now. This is Aya Madre with Estela Pangoza, south of Iquitos. At Nihuirao, which is also south of Iquitos, we have on the left Hilbear, he is one of the proudest ayahuasca makers I've ever met. Makes a phenomenal pot of brew, makes it remarkably strong. Sometimes he'll look at you and say, "Great visions tonight," meaning he put in extra chacruna. He's got no job right now. The support staff, and it takes a good number of people to support a place like Nihuirao because it's popular and gets a lot of business. They don't have any work right now. There's nobody going there. So they're not supporting their families. They're not putting money into their communities. They're in great trouble right now. Shamans Don Alberto Davila, who's on the left, who is the shaman at Blue Morpho, and Doña Laura on the right, who is at Temple of the Way of Light. These are top level, top class shamans, remarkable people to be in ceremony with, people who really can help you to have a transformative and life altering experience in all of the best ways. They're not doing anything now. They don't have people coming to them. They're not leading ceremonies except for what local people might need. And the whole flow that they've had going, serving the needs of pasajeros, serving people who've been going down to South America for various personal reasons, that's over for now. We don't know when that's coming back. Also, on the left, Rolando Tangoa, dear friend of mine, fabulous shaman, somebody that I've been sitting with for many years. Him and his family, he's got no way to support them now. He has a small center out of Pucallpa. And here on the right, Carlos Tanner with Shaman Enrique, Carlos has a very ambitious program with 3 centers at the Ayahuasca Foundation, making hundreds and hundreds of liters of ayahuasca on a regular basis, but now not making any, not participating in the economy. The shamans with no income and not feeding their families that way. So all of these centers, all of these shamans, all of their families, all of the communities have been greatly affected by this. We know that the medicine, we know that ayahuasca offers great healing. Many people who go to ayahuasca, as they do to mushrooms, as they do to peyote, as they do to San Pedro, go because there are things that they want to overcome in their lives that they've been unable to overcome, that they want to break through, that they haven't been able to break through. And the remarkable thing about ayahuasca is that it opens the mind, it opens the heart, it opens dimensionality of experience. It helps you to transform in ways that may be unifying. Some people feel very fragmented in life. It kind of helps to put them back together again. But right now, what's fragmented is the ayahuasca scene. It's not as though, once COVID-19 is over, if it's ever completely over, that everybody will just go back to the jobs they had, go back to the scenes they had, because it's not likely that all the centers that existed will come back. I would imagine that a fraction of them will. So what we have seen with this is the back end of everything that we are connected to, and all of the people and places and activities that have helped us in our transformations, thanks to ayahuasca, experiencing great difficulty and great disarray at this particular point in time. And with that said, I would like to come back and take questions, have conversation, and I'm not really sure what to do about my screen here. Hello.
Michael, do you have any troubleshooting so Chris can get his screen off there?
Yeah. Sorry, Chris. So you're trying to just get your presentation back up?
No. The PowerPoint is over. I'm ready to take questions.
Oh,
and
okay,
talk to
perfect.
people,
Okay,
but I don't
awesome.
really know how to do that.
Yeah, so I think now you can just hover over the screen. Actually, I can just take this away, I think.
Okay. Great. All right.
There you go. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Amazing technology, hey? So we have a number of questions here. We have over 13 in the crowdcast, and then we have about 7 or 8 that were asked ahead of time. So I'm just going to flip back and forth between the crowdcast and the other questions. So
sounds good.
We'll start with the most popular one here on crowdcast. What obscure lesser known plants that you've encountered do you think hold the most potential as medicines? And are there any that are psychedelic in nature?
Okay, in terms of lesser known plants, these days, thanks to the extent to which we have good communication and we can get information, many of the so-called lesser known plants aren't so lesser known these days. I would say that a lot of people are not familiar with Schizandra Berry, although many might be, but Schizandra Berry is probably one of the most remarkable and still least popular of the adaptogenic herbs, the herbs that enhance energy, stamina, endurance, mental clarity, immune function, cardiovascular function, make you feel terrific. Schizandra berry is not the kind of berry that you have with granola and almond milk. Okay, it's a very strange flavored berry. It's called wu-wei-zhe. That means 5 flavored berry. So it's sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and pungent all at the same time. First time I ever bit into a Schizandra berry, I was in China at a dinner, and there was this duck stew, and I had a spoonful of it, and I bit into something soft, and all of a sudden, all these confusing flavors crossed across my mouth at once. And I turned to the only person at the table who spoke English, and I said, "What is it?" And he knew right away. He said, "Oh, that's Schizandra," which we were actually going to see the next day. So I would say that Schizandra is quite extraordinary. There is another obscure, but in certain areas famous root uh, called Raponticum carthamoides. It's also referred to as marl root, and that comes from Siberia, and that is a muscle building agent that also enhances energy and endurance. And I was in a place called Semensky Pass in the central southern Altai region in Siberia. And Semensky Pass is where the Russian special forces go for survival training. It's a rough area. And my friends and I got there on a day that sadly deteriorated terribly. So we actually got caught in really bad weather. But while we were up there, we saw these wild horses that live on this plant, Raponticum carthamoides, and they were like cartoon horses. They had massive muscles. They looked like they worked out all day, and it was the strangest thing to see. So I think that's an obscure plant that also has great promise. There are many others as I go into tamanu oil, for example, probably the single most beneficial skin healing agent in the entire world. Nothing comes close to it, nothing at all. And yet it's relatively little known. It's something I've been working with for many years, and I've given to hundreds of people. But for the most part, people don't know about or have at home tamanu oil. And yet you put it on pretty much anything that happens to skin and it can heal it. So I would say in terms of, do I know of obscure plants that are also psychedelic? None are really coming to mind. None that this crowd wouldn't know, certainly.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. We're sticking with Crowdcast here for the second question, and it is, what is your opinion on the scarcity of ayahuasca? Is there enough? Are we putting too much pressure on the two plants?
Okay, there was a lot of talk for years that the ayahuasca supply was in terrible peril, that it was in grave danger, that it was being wiped out. And this was to the great extent what led me to conduct a 2-year-long ayahuasca sustainability survey to find out the story. And basically what I found out, with my team over 4 different missions to Loreto and Ucayali provinces, specifically meeting with many dozens of people involved in the trade, is that the supply is quite substantial. The larger groups like UDV and Santo Daime are cultivating their own anyway, so they're not taking it from the wild. So the largest actual numerical users are not endangering the supply. And at the very same time, a lot more people are cultivating vine because they realize that that's an important thing to do to ensure future supply. So my opinion, based on about 12 years of asking questions in villages, and then 2 concentrated years of surveying the ayahuasca plant populations themselves, is that we're in good shape with this. I mean, especially now. Now we have all the ayahuasca on earth because there's almost no demand for it. But I think the one factor that could significantly accelerate overuse of supply would be the export market. But now the export market has so substantially fallen apart, that's not an issue either. So right now the supply is good.
All right, good to know. This also ties into another question that we have here on Crowdcast, and it's from one of the speakers that we have lined up coming up here in July, Chris Dyer. And it is, are the people you work with harvesting ayahuasca also planting some back so that it is sustainable? So I believe you already touched on that.
Well, the harvesters who are harvesting around Lago Emeria and Chauya, which are really the very remote, difficult to get to ayahuasca breadbasket at the end of the Rio Tamaya, they're not planting, no. But people in both Loreto and Ucayali provinces are planting. Willer Noriega says that he has planted about 3,000 vines. I know that the Ayahuasca Foundation has many hundreds of vines that they've planted. The same is true with Temple of the Way of Light. I know that last time I was at a Blue Morpho, there was a pretty good sized patch of mature vines going along a long way. So my sense is that while the harvesters themselves are not, in fact, replanting ayahuasca, there's a tremendous amount of cultivation going on. And if you're familiar with the Hawaii scene, you know that all ayahuasca there, and it's a big scene, is cultivated, and the vine grows extremely quickly and very big and juicy. So Hawaii is turning out to be a tremendous source of ayahuasca also.
All right, great. Thanks, Chris. There is a question that has come up in the Q&A as well as in the chat, and it is, can you recommend any organizations that support these communities that we can donate to so that people can get help?
Well, I know that Chaikuni Foundation through Temple of the Way of Light is doing good work. I actually don't know what the status is of Chaikuni right now, given that there are no revenues from Temple of the Way of Light to support it. It may be in great disarray at this point. In fact, I would imagine so. But Chaikuni would be a possibility. You know, even designating Iquitos area or Pucallpa area Red Cross activity. I mean, these, you're talking, you know, hundreds of thousands of people who are quite a bit on the ropes. In the case of Iquitos, you have about 475,000 people in the area. It is the largest urban area on earth that can't be reached by road. And I know that aid organizations like Red Cross are working there. It's also possible you could contact Ayahuasca Foundation. I probably should have done this ahead of time. Ayahuasca Foundation may be doing some community activities. In fact, I'll contact Carlos and find out and email you if I get any good information on that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to a couple of the questions that we have submitted in advance. And let's see. What is the strangest ritual that you have either witnessed firsthand or participated in?
Well, strange. Yeah, I guess this pretty much counts. Many years ago, around, I think it was 1998, my sort of home village, if you will, in Vanuatu, South Pacific, was wiped out by a tidal wave. And my dear friend who lived in Vanuatu, who was a Tahitian prince named Paya, called me and he told me about this, and he said he wanted to do a firewalk and raise money for that. And I said, gee, what a great idea. You know, it sounds terrific. Yahoo, let's go. And so anyway, a couple of months later, I found myself back down in Vanuatu, South Pacific, where I have worked with Kava since 1995. And that time became the first of 6 times for me that I was a very active participant in massive Polynesian-style firewalks. Vanuatu is actually Melanesia. It's a different part of Oceania. It's a different part of the island communities that stretch across the Pacific. But my friend Paya was Tahitian, Polynesian, and he brought firewalking to Vanuatu. And these are not backyard empowerment workshops where you burn some wood and then you put the coals out on the lawn and you walk on them. And I respect that. Fire is fire. but these were 35-foot long, 15-foot wide, 4-foot deep pits filled with 50, 60 tons of wood, and then covered with large river stones that would turn red hot that you could flash fry steaks on by the time it was time to firewalk. And I have read and I've been told that you need a special state of mind, a Zen mind, or some complete nonsense like that to firewalk. And the truth of the matter is that every time I firewalked, and I was in 6 of these events, walking several times a night each time, I was nothing but terrified. The idea of stepping into a roaring inferno of fire onto red hot stones in the dark of night when there are fire holes between the stones and you have to somewhat slowly and carefully make your way across the pit so that you don't die. I'd never got into a Zen state, but I would say that the entire atmosphere of doing that, it takes about 2 weeks to prepare these things. The largest one we ever had, we had 1,000 people. Smallest one, I think maybe 600 people. They would pay $3 to come and have a feast afterwards. We had tons and tons and tons of food. And it was a magical experience. And the last time I firewalked, when we were preparing to go over to the field where the fire pit was and all the people were waiting for us, as we walked away from Paya's house, we had not drunk any kava, we had not done any drugs, nothing. The entire area around me became this huge corridor of Polynesian and Pacific warriors and gods that just appeared in the air. And I was completely not expecting this. I was very much unprepared for this. But these huge heads of these warriors and gods. And as we went along, going out to make our way to the field, wearing these robes of auti leaves covered with coconut and tamanu oils, and our bodies completely slick with oils that we'd been rubbed down with as the leaders of the firewalk, I realized that these were all saying goodbye to us. And that was the last firewalk, and it never happened again.
Wow. Wow, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Speaking of Vanuatu, that leads to another question. What is the most surprising thing you learned about the culture in Vanuatu?
Well, I was just there right before COVID-19 got very bad. I've been going there for 25 years. I'm a chief there. I was their honorary consul to the United States for a few years. I've had a deep involvement with Vanuatu. And I think the thing that first ever surprised me the most, that continues to surprise me, is the abject friendliness and gracious hospitality of the people there. The native people of Vanuatu living on the outer islands don't really have a lot. I mean, possession-wise, they're doing much better as a result of the kava economy, although COVID-19 has temporarily hurt that terribly. And Cyclone Henry that hit them very, very hard over a month ago has badly damaged the industry. But these people are pretty much the friendliest people I have ever met in my life. Quick to smile, quick to laugh. One of the things that I love about them is they make constant fun of each other. So when the guy, like if I'm with a bunch of guys, somebody will do something and everybody will laugh at that person and they'll make jokes. And then when it's time for you to be laughed at, everybody laughs at you. And there's never any sense of malice or meanness behind it, just good spirited humor. So I think it's the friendliness of them that continues to just completely gobsmack me to this day. I love those people.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. So let's hop over to the Crowdcast again for another question here. And it's on ayahuasca. So if ayahuasca comes to the masses and demand increases dramatically internationally, do you worry about large corporations, aka Big Pharma, harvesting and damaging the culture and environment in relation to the current methods of harvesting?
Well, I think that the likelihood of ayahuasca really coming to the masses is not so great, because it is, if you know, if you've sampled the vast psychedelic buffet that's out there, from psilocybin mushrooms to San Pedro and peyote, you know that it's pretty much one of the roughest rides in town. I mean, I've never gotten sick on mushrooms. I've not wound up in the baño, barfing my face off, or anything like that. I've not been wrestled to the ground by a psychedelic anaconda that has pounded on my chest for hours. But with ayahuasca, I have. I do not believe it's going to become vastly popular that way. I do think that more people who have not tried ayahuasca will be interested in doing so, either because of the very good positive information that continues to come out about it, and also because of some of the bizarre media, like Kentucky Ayahuasca, which is a series, which is a kind of a real head scratcher. But those people get help. In terms of a concern about the pharmaceuticalization, the corporatization of these things, yeah, I have that concern with all of these plants and with the fungus. I mean, I see, um, what a mess big corporations have made of the cannabis scene, for example. I mean, I'm in New England. We're legendary growers in New England. I know California gets all the credit, but we were growing Afghani before they ever got Afghani seeds in California. And yes, their plants are bigger and more fragrant, but the point is, we have a long, long history of working with this plant, and we know how to do it, and people grow their own and people share their own, and you go to a party and you bring somebody a mason jar of ganja, and it's like, oh, thank you, that's wonderful. That's the spirit of the plant medicine. That's the spirit of sharing, not, hey, we're going to be able to jack this stock price up, and when we do, we're going to have an IPO, we're going to sell big time, I'm going to be a billionaire. That's just horse shit. I'm very sorry to see the move to pharmaceuticalize psilocybin, although I'm quick to say psilocybin is a pharmaceutical drug, and it has been for a long time. The magic mushrooms that contain psilocybin have been around for forever, as far as we know. But psilocybin itself is a drug that was manufactured by Sandoz Pharmaceutical, by Albert Hoffman, who also discovered LSD. So there's been a lot of pharmaceutical interaction with these things. But yes, I do have concerns that corporations, entities that are really just in it for the money, will basically gouge the eyes and the soul out of this. And I think it's important for people who have, a love of humanity, and a love of nature, and a love of the plants, and a love of each other, and a respect for the real true beauty and wisdom that can arise from employing these things, to protect them and to keep our culture, the real psychedelic culture, going full bore, whatever those idiots in the offices in the gray suits choose to do.
I agree. Thank you for sharing that. What do you think is, and this actually answers the other question that came in from our viewers ahead of time, is what is your most immediate concern that comes up around the commodification of plant medicines? So you kind of touched on that.
It's basically venal, greedy bastards getting hold of our medicines and turning them into Coca-Cola. I mean, when Corona invested $4 billion in the beverage market, in the cannabis beverage market in Canada, everybody went, wow, that's amazing. Well, you don't see anything out there from them. Nothing's happening with that. I don't know what on earth they're doing with their 4 billion, but they don't have a product out there. And when you look at the mess that's been made, in many places, I mean, the Canadian legalization of cannabis has been an abject disaster for all the people who, had edibles and other wonderful products that have supported their families and been much beloved. They've just been wiped off the map. That's not right. So we have to keep the underground economy strong. We have to keep, the actual psychedelic revolution a revolution. And that means do not give it to the people in the gray suits.
Thank you. Well said. So let's hop over to Crabcast again. And we have some more questions about sustainability. And quite a few actually about sustainability. One is, I'm always curious about the sustainability of these plant sacraments, which are facing the most risk and more worth staying away from in a sense. Let's try this again. Which plants are facing the most risk and are more worth staying away from in that sense?
Well, I think I can answer that. Peyote is at risk. Peyote really isn't being cultivated, and the peyote gardens in South Texas are pretty much where it's gathered by the people who then conduct ceremonies. And as people become more interested in psychedelics and want psychedelic experiences, more and more peyote is being taken. And I do see that as a real problem, especially when you consider that San Pedro cactus, which is not endangered and which is in fact quite abundant in nature and can be grown, has the actual same percentage of mescaline in it per dry weight as peyote. In fact, even just a slight bit more. So if people want to have the peyote experience, I know San Pedro is a different plant. I know that, people worry about, well, but I won't be getting the spirit of peyote. My estimation from experience with both is that you can very easily transition over to San Pedro and have a terrific experience and not be potentially harming the supply of peyote. I think that there's some reason to be concerned about supply of Iboga, although at this point in time, Iboga doesn't have the same popularity as ayahuasca did prior to COVID-19. But that would be something to keep in mind. It's not super abundant. So those would be two that I would keep on my mental radar.
Perfect, thank you. So this is a question submitted ahead of time. Do you think psychedelics can make you a more strategic thinker?
Well, it can make you a more strategic thinker. I believe that psychedelics can help to make you more of a thinker, period. I think that if we take our psychedelic experiences to heart, if we don't just trip and go, wow, that was fabulous, let's go, whatever, let's go to the movies or something. I mean, if you absorb it, if you digest the psychedelic experience, then my opinion is that most people wind up being more strategic in their thinking. I mean, if they're inclined that way, because it helps you think more overall, or think more clearly, or consider more than you perhaps would otherwise. I don't think it necessarily means, you make you a better hedge fund manager or something like that. But I think it enhances all dimensions of thinking. But I also love the psychedelics because they also enhance non-thinking. We have vast brains and vast minds. And a great deal of, we know, for example, when people take mushrooms, the activity in the frontal cortex actually goes down. you would think, oh, there'd be so much more. There's a lot going on inside, as new neural pathways just kind of bubble up and people experience extra dimensionality of their own minds. So I don't even know how I got to, I don't even know how I got here. I was just having a good time. I completely forgot what you asked me.
You're on a good track, though. You're on a good track.
Is my trajectory kind of heading to the point there?
Yeah, the question was, can psychedelics make you a more strategic thinker?
Yes, but however, I mean, look, I've done plenty of psychedelics and I still digress sometimes so that I forget where I started. So yes and no, I think, is a fair answer.
I like that answer. Thank you. So, do you think there are fundamental differences in messages from different plants? Or does every plant share the same fundamental message?
All plants carry life. All plants, do well when they have the right support around them. Do plants have different messages? I think we can come away with different things. I mean, for example, with ayahuasca, I have found my experiences with ayahuasca to be largely very intense and thorough. And ayahuasca makes me consider everything from hurts in my life that have held me back, maybe to things I've done that have been wrong with other people, to possibilities that I haven't thoroughly considered that might be worth pursuing. Whereas when I drink San Pedro, for example, which I do typically when I tend fires at parties and gatherings, I'm immediately delivered into a place of tremendous brightness and joy. And I don't really seem to have to go through any of the intermediary stuff, like the pain and suffering and the vomiting and maybe the diarrhea and all the other nasty things that can occur with ayahuasca. So I think the effects that they offer are quite different one from another. Ultimately, I think that they're all life imbuing when they're employed thoughtfully, and they expand our possibilities of mind and living, whatever the plant.
Great, thank you. We're just going to touch back on a previous question real quick here, and it's the question, do you think psychedelics can make you a more strategic thinker? And when you had alluded to the fact that non-thinking is a good thing, can you maybe elaborate on why that is so important?
Sure. And I will digress to start this. We have about 100 billion neurons in our brains, and that's a lot. That's a lot of neurons. Neuroscientists estimate that the number of possible connections between neurons exceeds the number of atoms in the universe. A mind-blowing idea. We theoretically, or we're brought up to assume that we use about 7% of our minds or our brains, but that's just horseshit from scientists who haven't figured the rest out. My sense, both from 50 years of yoga and meditation every day, and also generous employment of psychedelics over that period of time, is that one of the most gracious and lovely of all possible conditions is to dwell in a thoughtless state.
Mm-hmm.
And when when the ego is really broken down or burned to the ground or blown to pieces or dissolved, or however it is that it happens to you, you may find yourself for a period of time just floating in a vast sea of consciousness with no particular thoughts crossing your mind at all. That is something you can also achieve in meditation, although it's a bit harder, but people do. I certainly do. And it is the non-thinking that gives you the fullness of all the possible connectivity of your mind, and also all of the connectivity of you and everything else. And you can't get that full sense of connectivity and that full sense of awe while there's a lot of dialogue and chatter going on. So the thoughtless mind is not to be confused with the careless mind. The careless mind, the person who doesn't care. But the thoughtless mind, when the mind is devoid of thought and you're still aware and conscious, that's really a gracious state that refreshes you, that revives you, that clarifies you, and also broadens your horizons in all kinds of ways.
Absolutely. There's so many benefits that one can derive from that, right? To bring back into this world, to be a better person and more joyful, happy, etc. Do you believe that plant medicine is ultimately a benevolent force and that it is here to help humanity heal?
Well, I don't think that the plants are put here to help us heal. I think that they do help us heal, but I don't, I don't personally think that the world revolves around us. I do believe that plants fortunately heal us, and it makes all the sense in the world. We've co-evolved with plants for billions of years, where we share the same biology, the same antioxidants that prevent plants from premature destruction due to exposure to heat, light, air, moisture, and time do the same for us in our bodies. We have circulatory systems, and there are many tens of thousands of vascular plants. Plants, we breathe the air that they let out. We eat them as foods. We make homes out of them. We make clothing out of them. We take medicines from them. So we derive enormous benefits from plants, and they from us when we propagate and care for them and further them in whatever environments we're in. But I do not believe that they were put here for our pleasure or our health. I think that we exist in a more co-equal, symbiotic relationship. And one of the big problems that we face as human beings is that we think we're the center of existence when we're so clearly not that at all.
Absolutely. Have you ever encountered a plant medicine with a malevolent intent, in the sense where the consciousness within the plant does not wish for humanity to heal, but ultimately for humanity to destroy itself?
Well, this is kind of a takeoff on some TV series over the past few years that have shown evil mandrake roots wishing people evil. No, I've never heard of a plant medicine that carried evil intent. I do think it's possible to be a malicious person and to put some of that malice into something that you prepare. I've met at least one person who I'm quite confident qualified in that way, but the plants themselves, no. I think that they, look, they're all competing and they're all coexisting in a vast and very complex ecosystem, and we're damaging that ecosystem as fast as we can, as hard as we can, in as many ingeniously evil ways as possible. I don't think the plants are the ones doing anything bad. I think we're the ones.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you. So back to Crowdcast here, we have a few more questions. And one is, how many cultures around the world have traditions that involve the use of ayahuasca or any other oral DMT preparations?
Well, the employment of ayahuasca, at least until 15 years ago or so, really has been limited to Central and South America. So you don't have ayahuasca in other cultures. So that's the extent of that. And what was the second part of the question?
Or any other oral DMT preparations?
All of the no, I know that there are ayahuasca analogs. John Ott did a great book, the ayahuasca analogs, showing what pairs of plants in what cultures could match so that you could have MAO inhibition and a DMT. I mean, there's DMT in plants all over the world, but in terms of oral DMT use in cultures, I don't know of it outside of Central and South America.
That actually ties into another question that came up here as well. How many plants contain DMT or any other similar non-orally active tryptamines? How frequent is the presence of these compounds in the plant kingdom?
There are many thousands of plants that contain DMT. They may do so in microscopic quantities, or they may do so in larger quantities. So we don't actually know how many plants do. In terms of similar compounds, I am not an expert on all of the different tryptamine-based compounds out there that might be psychoactive, but there are many.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So we have time for about 2 to 3 more questions, and we have a few left on the crowdcast here. And this one is in regards to demand for ayahuasca, I believe. So it is, when you say there is no demand, does this mean that the majority of the demand comes from retreats for people outside of the local area? What about the demand for locals in terms of their healing ceremonies? Are these not frequent? And are there any other uses of this vegetation in the local communities?
Well, going in reverse in terms of uses of the vegetation, Francisco Montes, the man I showed who has 6,000 vines, has so many vines that he makes fence railings out of them, and he makes home decorations out of them. I mean, he has the world's largest amount of ayahuasca vine, period. In terms of demand, local people don't go do ceremonies 4 nights in a week or whatever, the way it happens at the way it happens at ayahuasca centers. So as I showed when I showed the slide of Julio Siri, the local shaman in San Rafael, there are probably people in his village who are still coming to him occasionally and saying, "Hey, Julio, I've got a problem with such and such. Can I do a ceremony with you?" I think that the small village ceremonies, which are infrequent in general, are probably still happening. In terms of demand, you've got really 2 types of demand: large market demand. You have a tremendous amount of demand going to the ayahuasca retreat centers, and all of that has stopped. But also you have ayahuasca ceremonies and gatherings that are not happening right now outside of South America, where people would otherwise be importing ayahuasca, and those for the most part have not been happening during COVID-19. So that demand has also died down. I suspect that when this is over or subdued enough, that, for example, in Iquitos, where we previously had about 120 centers operating to some extent or another prior to COVID-19, I would be surprised if there were more than 25 that actually, got revived. I think it's a very rough road ahead in terms of the demand that we may see from outside markets, people in the US and other places wanting to import ayahuasca for ceremonies here. That remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. In regards to demographics, we have a question here, and it's, what demographics are these ayahuasca industries most dependent upon? Is there any information in regards to that?
What I've seen, and it's really just seeing thousands of pasajeros troop through Iquitos and to a lesser extent through Pucallpa, is that for the most part you have people in their early 20s to say 40s seem to be the greatest concentration of people going down to ceremonies. But it's very clear that people of all ages, including grandparents sometimes showing up with a granddaughter or a grandson, are also participating. I don't think that, I mean, the youngest kids I've ever seen drink, I think one boy was 8. His mom was a shaman, and he drank with her, and I said, how was your ceremony last night? He goes, "Oh, good." It was just another night with mom. I don't think you really have many children drinking, except the children of shamans who are being groomed to, be curanderos over time. But I'd say your great concentration is in the 20 to 40 range. That's what I've seen.
Okay, thank you. And is this knowledge of how to properly harvest the ingredients for making ayahuasca being passed down from generation to generation? Or are younger generations not interested in learning these skills?
Up until the ayahuasca boom, up until about 15, 18 years ago, shamanism was very much on the decline. People didn't want to hang out in the forest with their grandmothers and go pick herbs and sit in a hut and brew a bunch of stuff and give it to somebody who came along because they had arthritis. That just wasn't their goal in life. A lot of people started moving to cities, becoming moto drivers, bus boys in restaurants, chambermaids in hotels. The ayahuasca scene, the explosion of ayahuasca, the proliferation of interest and activity in ayahuasca, revived shamanism in areas where it was dying out almost completely. Now people say, hey, I can live in my community. I can learn from my father or my grandmother or my aunt or whatever. I can learn to use the medicines. I can make a living. I don't have to leave my friends. When I want to go into the city because I want to buy a pair of Nikes or a radio, I can go in the city and buy a pair of Nikes and a radio and then come back home. So actually, I think that community cohesion has to an extent been helped by the ayahuasca scene. I think there's no question that many benefits have arisen from it. And I'm eager to see, some people kind of get back to some sort of normal, because I think that carrying on this plant medicine, carrying on the shamanic traditions, albeit in a new time. They all have mobile phones. They're all watching satellite soccer games. We need this. We don't want to lose this. This is a very important part of the heart and soul of the whole psychedelic scene. And for that matter, I think the health and well-being of humanity.
Absolutely. So we have time for one more question here. And it is, do you have any familiarity and or experience with TMA2? And could you comment on the shamanic treatment of schizophrenia? So those are two questions in one there.
I know nothing about TMA2. I don't even know what it is. If you told me it was a car wax, I'd say great. So sorry on that. And the second part was what?
Can you comment on the shamanic treatment of schizophrenia?
Schizophrenia has come up in conversation a great deal in the therapeutic world with regard to psychedelics. Mostly therapists, psychotherapists seem to feel that schizophrenics would be the wrong people to take psychedelics. Nonetheless, we know of instances in which people who have been schizophrenic have actually been helped by taking different psychedelics. Schizophrenia is not a term or a diagnosis in Native communities. Mostly it's susto, and that is a disease of the soul. And susto is treated by various shamanic methods. It may be treated by long rhythmic sessions of drumming and chanting. It may be treated with ayahuasca, may be treated with certain of the psychoactive snuffs. A person who is being treated for susto, for disorder of the soul, may require extended treatment over a period of time. So their whole relationship to their relationship to mental health is different from ours traditionally. And so they do have treatment for schizophrenia, but they don't ever call it schizophrenia, and you wouldn't hear it as such.
Makes sense. Thank you. So we are at time. Thank you so much for being here. That flew by. Do you have any final words or comments or advice that you would like
this global pandemic has affected everybody. I mean, I just spent the last 26 years as a global explorer away from home about 50% of the time, most years, traveling all over the world, being with indigenous people everywhere. And I'm not doing that now. It's been an utter disruption of my life. And still, I'm privileged. I'm okay. I'm fed. My wife and I are safe. So many people are in much, much more critical condition. I believe that any of the interconnectedness that we have discovered in the psychedelic world, and any of that sense of that, and any of the compassion that we've felt for the people that we love or the people we know in ceremony, that we need to bring that forward right now and extend that to as many people around us as possible. Everybody's under stress. Everybody's going through something. This world is not what it was even just a few months ago. And if the psychedelics really do have lasting value for us, then it's helping us to remain kind, positive people, especially in times of duress, and to be, you know, if we can, kind of beacons of light in a difficult situation. And I want to thank all of you who have tuned in today for doing so. It's always a great pleasure and privilege. I wish I could see your faces. That's the thing I love about speaking to a group, is looking out and seeing the smiles or the nods of approval, or the head shakes of disapproval, or whatever it might be, but making that connection. And I do miss that. But I thank you all just the same and appreciate being part of this program.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your wisdom and expertise and knowledge with us. We could probably have this conversation for hours. There's so many things that you could share with us. So thank you again for joining us. We appreciate you being here. And hopefully we can have you back again sometime soon.
Thank you. Bless you all. Take good care.
Thank you. So in closing, I just like to take this time to thank our guest, Chris Kilham. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to Michael Oliver that you saw pop on the screen there for a moment, who's working diligently behind the scenes. Thank you to the MAPS Canada volunteers who are assisting with this event as well behind the scenes. And very importantly, thank you to all of you for being here to support this series, these speakers, and this important research. So up and coming, our next episode will be on June 16th with Dennis McKenna. Make sure and submit your questions in advance. And our full lineup can be viewed on the webpage at mapscanada.org/webinar. We have 11 episodes remaining, and if you haven't purchased the series and would like to, you are able to up until the end of August, as all videos will be recorded. So thank you again, Chris, and thank you again, everyone, for joining. We look forward to seeing you on the next episodes. Bye for now.